Welcome, everyone, to Evolving Together with Christine Labbé, beyond the diagnosis into a new realm of possibilities. Your child deserves to be seen, heard, valued, and celebrated exactly as they are. Hi, I'm Christine, founder of Evolve Movement, a pediatric neuromovement practitioner, conscious parenting coach, and author of Our Superpowers, celebrating differently abled kids and their siblings. I offer new insights, understanding, and expansion that empower you to support your child in a way that is aligned with their soul's potential. You are not limited to the stories you've been taught to believe. You can write your own narrative. It takes 28% of parents with a neurodiverse child to awaken and advocate for change to start seeing progress. Be the change you want to see and take the first step towards a new future. Evolving Together starts now. Welcome to Evolving Together, where we delve into the possibilities beyond your child's diagnosis. I'm your host, Christine Labbé, and today we have an incredibly special episode for you. We're diving deep into the transformative power of neuroplasticity and movement in child development, particularly for children with special needs. Our guest today is Sylvia Shordike, a pioneer in the field who has dedicated nearly 30 years to refining a unique approach that builds on the foundational work of Dr. Moshe Feldenkrais. Sylvia's work emphasizes the importance of relational presence and intentional movement, techniques that not only enhance the brain's capacity to reorganize itself, but also create a safe and nurturing environment where children can truly thrive. In today's conversation, we'll explore how Sylvia's methods empower both parents and children, fostering a deep connection that facilitates meaningful growth and development. Whether you're a parent, caregiver, or professional working with children facing neurodiversity, disability, or complex health needs, this episode is packed with insights that could profoundly change the way you approach child development. So without further ado, let's welcome Sylvia Shordike to the podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Evolving Together. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I'm so excited for you to meet Sylvia. Sylvia, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such an exciting pleasure.
So Sylvia, I was thinking perhaps we could start the conversation with the organic learning process of the child. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Let me start from the beginning, so to speak. Let's say everything goes well, the child gets born. As we know now, of course, the child doesn't get born tabula rasa. I mean, the child does get information in the womb. You know, they can already hear, they see light, they feel the movement of the mother, right? And they also are very capable, as we know now, to detect stress or well-being of the mother mentally. So we already have learned movements and a lot of reflexes, of course, start in the womb, right? And some of these reflexes help us to go, for example, through the birth canal. But let's still start from birth. So now we come out usually with the head first. And here we have an interesting subject right there, because the head holds all the receptive organs, right? We have like the eyes, we have the nose, we have the mouth, we have the ears, And so we are already coming with all our receptors out into the world with the head first. Then we are in gravity, so to speak, right? So that we get caught, or hopefully we get put on the mother's chest right away if everything goes well. And here the learning starts from that moment in gravity, right? And in the environment that child gets born into. It's not anymore just by itself in the womb, safe in a container, first floating. At the end, we know there's not much floating going on because there's no room anymore. And then the learning begins. So the child immediately starts to hear and feel and smell, and the mother, and of course, if it's born in the hospital, all the hospital smells, everything, the lights, everything has an influence into the child. And the child starts to learn from the beginning, right? So let's say then we go home, if everything goes well and we have the child with us, immediately the child feels, senses the movement, has to use of the mother holding the baby. Then usually they start to latch on at the beginning, which is a reflexive learned movement, right? So we don't have to learn to suck. It's a reflexive movement that later pretty soon becomes intentional. Then the child nurses intentionally and sucks intentionally, but first it's reflexive. And the information goes into the nervous system through all the reflexive and random movements to begin with. So I'm going to stop here for a moment, and then maybe you can ask further. I just don't want to throw out too many information at once.
Yes, actually, well, we can specifically talk about those random movements because, when a baby is very small, we put them down on the floor on a blanket and they might start to move. And just to perhaps explain how much learning actually occurs and how those random movements actually help the child begin to map themselves and
Yes,
their body.
absolutely. So the best really for a baby is first when they're very little, they are held a lot, of course. They still need the close contact to the mom and the smell and the security, the heartbeat that it can hear. And it wants to kind of feel safe. And the mother, of course, has the instinct to keep the baby safe, so we're not right away put the baby constantly on the floor. But
Mhm.
pretty soon, it's a very, very safe place to have the baby be on the floor, on a blanket, in a safe environment, because those random movements and still reflexive movements for the first weeks of the baby's life are very, very important because those movements in relation to the environment and gravity informs the nervous system and evokes the natural learning process of the child that can only kick in through sensing, feeling, through movement in relation to the environment. And environment, I mean the floor, the room that the child is in, the people that are close by, the light that comes into the window, the sound that the baby can hear. Maybe a dog walks by and they start to see some animal walk by, or they see the mother walk by. It's a huge amount of information that comes into the little baby's life. And I want to just cut into a subject right away. You really don't have to, because of that, you don't have to bombard your little child right away with noisy toys. There is a lot coming into the baby's nervous system from the get-go that they have to scan, digest, and integrate. And if you do too much to beginning, then it's too much stimulation can it be for the baby. The baby doesn't need stimulation. It's enough stimulation to be born and now out there in the world, in the environment that gets born into, hopefully into a safe place. And then those movements, the random movements and reflexive movements, and then becomes more and more random and then it goes very fast intentional. For example, I want to say the baby is in the mother's arms for breastfeeding. And again, first I said it's all reflexive. Then pretty soon the child, you know, because it moves the arms or the fingers, and then it pushes into the breast. All of a sudden, more milk comes out of the breast. And then very soon the baby learns, oh, if I press here, there's more milk coming out. That's good. So then it does it intentional. And maybe even way before that baby grabs a toy, you know. So that is that beautiful dance at the very beginning between random movement and becoming then intentional. And all that gets learned through movement via, you know, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. It's really a constant, the brain is a constant information organ to bring in information for the baby. And that's why movement is so important.
Now, let's perhaps talk about children who are not moving quite as much in those early stages. So you put them on the floor and they may not be moving quite as much. Perhaps you can speak to that and maybe even offer some different ways that we can begin to create experiences for those children to make those new neural pathways.
Right. I mean, this is what I do. I teach parents what to do and how to live with their baby when it's not moving randomly for whatever reason. So maybe sometimes the birth was too stressful. And so we're not talking about a brain injury right now, but maybe something happened, or the C-section. Often the C-section, but when they take the baby out of the nowadays smaller incision that they do to help the mother recover, which is great for the mother. However, sometimes for the babies, it's not so great because they have to be pulled through a smaller opening, so to speak. And sometimes when it's done too fast, there can be already something disruptive for the baby. And sometimes they get stuck with the head to one side, which we call torticollis.
Yes.
And that by itself, when a healthy baby has torticollis, for example, it stops the freedom of the movement throughout the whole spine, all the way down into the pelvis. And that is a huge problem. So you have to start to do something and to help the baby immediate, you know. So I really recommend find like somebody like you, ABM practitioner, somebody like me who works with children, somebody who understands to use intentional movement to evoke the child's learning process so they can come out of their stuckness. Because immediately that influences the baby and the development a lot. So I teach parents when they have a child and they see there's a problem, there's a brain injury, my child cannot access those random movements like a typical developing child. So this is what I do. I teach parents how to work with their children, to learn to work with their children, and also find immediately a practitioner who knows how to evoke through movement gently the native learning process of a child. That's so important because you can't force it. Now we come to the forcing part. You cannot do it for the baby. You cannot stretch. I mean, you can, often that's done that way, but it's painful and the baby hate it. And then the parents often get told, now you have to do this stretching every day. And they don't want to do it because their poor baby is crying, but they don't know any other way. Because now we come to the difference between evoking a child's native learning process and or forcing the baby into something that it can't feel. The only thing that the baby feels, or the child, is stress, is absolute stress. There's pain often involved. And then the learning gets, the brain doesn't learn. The brain then only knows alarm, alarm, I'm not safe. What's happening with me? And that actually means we are mostly in our brainstem. That's where we are. When you're in a fight or flight situation, you go into your brainstem. And luckily we have the brainstem. We need it all our lives, right? But there's not much learning. So if we want to really get the motor cortex going, the higher centers of the brain, the frontal lobe, the motor cortex, so that the child can learn something, then we have to do it in a way that we can talk and communicate with the nervous system of the child, because only the child's brain and the child's nervous system can make the new connections. Nobody can do it for the child. Only the child itself, herself, himself can do it, can create it.
You know, this speaks a lot about time. You know, you speak of forcing, and oftentimes these children are put on a timeline that is not at all in alignment with their development.
Yes,
And, you know, a lot of our work is very much about meeting a child where they are.
yes,
And when you speak of your work, you speak a lot about giving a child time and space to explore. And perhaps you can speak more about the importance of this for our children.
yes. So I can do it parallel. So one is with just a typical child who moves plenty by itself, by him herself. And I can also parallel talk about the child with special needs. So a child that is, when the parent has the I want to say, our environment is so weird. There's so much out there now with devices that it's confusing. And parents get a lot of confusing messages. This is good for your child. This is good for your child. And put it in that and put it in this swing. And then there's the bouncer. And I mean, we talk about this maybe a little later. But that is really not good. The child needs to have the space on the floor. And of course, then we carry it again, and then it gets information through our movements, But the child needs the space on the floor so it can move, so it can feel. Now, I'm going to explain this a little closer for parents. And I have it on my website. There's actually a mini lesson they can do, with me. So if the baby lies on the back, and I bring it to tummy time in a minute too, lies on the back, and it can roll the head from side to side, right? But most people don't think that the baby, because it has the head free and rolling, it rotates also the spine, and it informs down the pelvis. Then sometimes it rotates the pelvis from side to side, which also rotates through the spine up to the head, because the head and pelvis are connected throughout the spine. So the chest has to be free. Usually babies, if they're not already under a lot of stress, the chest is free. The sternum, the articulation of the ribs to the sternum is movable, especially at the beginning when, the bones are not so calcified yet. It's like all still soft. The bones are there, but they're not fully calcified. And so there's a lot of that going on. And now the biggest thing, what happens, that's what I always explain my parents, they are shifting weight. So in other words, very simply to explain, you roll a little bit to the left, you feel more your left side. You roll a little bit to the right, you feel more your right side. Simple as that. You feel your shoulder more on one side, then you feel the other shoulder more. Okay, you feel the right side of the skull more, you feel the left side of the... So just to simplify it, okay? But this simple weight shifting is from utter importance because, again, it informs the baby, who am I here in space at the current time? Me, feeling me there, feeling me here. Seeing at the same time, they develop their eyesight, with their movement, very important. So, and if you put, for example, like a newborn who doesn't hold the head up yet, we all kind of know that, right? There's a beginning, instinctively everybody knows. You have this tiny baby in your arm, you support them with the head, under the head, right? Because they can't do it by themselves yet. So if you put a kid like this on the belly, what happens is that they actually stop the movements they can do on the back because they cannot lift their head up. They can't do that yet because they don't use their extensor muscles yet, in the back that helps them to actually arch and lift the head. They're not supposed to. They're little, and then they can only rub their face into the floor. They cry usually because it's uncomfortable. The breathing gets a lot poorer, by the way, important factor, because they're lying on the chest, and there's pressure, and they don't know how to lift up yet, so there's too much pressure on the chest. And then they stop moving the pelvis and they stop moving the arms because they don't know how in that position. So you cut into a baby's development, the learning process, the natural learning process, you cut in and just put them in a place where they have no say in. So that's the first, so to speak, mistake. However, if I have a child that is already so many months old and hasn't learned to roll on the belly yet, that's when they need lessons. Okay, that's when they have to find you. That's why they have to find me. They have to find all these beautiful practitioners, again, who use intentional movements to communicate with the nervous system and elicit the native learning process. And that has to be done by the child. They cannot find it by themselves. So now there are crazy things like putting them into God knows devices, put them on the balance beam, where they're just kicking their reflexes. And for a moment, the whole baby or the whole young child is kind of one stiff board standing on a balance beam. I'm making it up. I'm just seeing stuff on the internet. And that's not learning. That's a temporary effect by the stressed out brain, because the brain is in a situation that it actually can't handle by itself. And then you should ask yourself when you go home, after all this, what has my child actually learned? What can I take away from this? What can my child take away from this? And that's the big question, right? Because again, you can't do it for them. You can't force it. They have to make the connections in their nervous system so that these little synapses, the cells, can do their thing and connect articulation, create articulation through the skeletal system, make the right muscles kick in, those who are dormant, wake up. And that all happens, of course, throughout the central and the peripheral nervous system.
So let's come back to this element of time, because you mention all of this, right? And oftentimes what happens is that parents are in a rush. They want their child to do all the things. They're still stuck on that, the milestones, because they're constantly being repeated to them. You have to understand from a parent standpoint, and, being the parent to a child who has Rett syndrome, we go into appointments and we're constantly reminded of the things our child's not doing. And so it creates this sense of urgency that we're supposed to be doing something to help our child access these milestones. And I think it's important for us to remind parents to just take that milestone chart and throw it in the garbage, because it really doesn't apply to our kids. That it's really not something that we should be looking at all. And in fact, that it's so important for us to really listen to our child's timeline. And that when we follow our child's timeline, however long it may take,
Yeah.
right? When, as you say, they feel it, when they create that that new neural pathway, when those things start to make sense to them, they start to change, they start to progress, and they become more self-confident.
Right.
Their self-worth, they have greater self-worth, they have a greater sense of self. And so it really makes a huge difference in terms of what will become possible, not only from a movement standpoint, but also just in terms of their own sense of identity and ability to access possibilities. So perhaps you could speak to that a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. So again, when I start with the typical children, my program, I go a lot also from the experiences of Emmy Pickler, who was a brilliant observer. And she, and she writes in her books about this, that the typical child, if you give them time and exploration time and the space to explore, They all come to their goals, but not all in the same timeline. So not all the children start to crawl at 8 months old. And so now we know from the book, oh, your child is not crawling at 8 months old. Oh my God, let's make it crawl. No. But if your child, absolutely not. Watch your child. Is your child moving? Is it having a good time? Is it exploring? They will come to their crawling. Not all the children start to walk at 12 months old. And it's not important to need to walk at 12 months old. Some do it later, some at 16 for whatever reason, or maybe some at 2 years old. What matters is that they move and explore and find themselves and feel themselves and become confident, right?
Mhm.
However, if you see your child is not moving, that's what I'm saying. Get help. And then the question is, what kind of help? And if you found a person like you and me, I'm just because it's us doing this here right now, and all the other wonderful practitioners out there, then you know very quickly, wow, this is great for my child. My child is changing. My
Mhm.
child is making progress. All of a sudden, from being just screaming and just being fearful there's another person that wants to yank me around or do something with me, and I don't know what the hell is going on. And the parent feels that internally, something is not right. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they find somebody or they go through my program and they learn, oh my God, that I understand movement now. I understand what it means to weight shift. I understand the importance of my child. And I understand how much, and now I'm come to your point, my child is able to learn. Maybe not in the same timeline as other children or typical child, but my child can learn. Okay. And that is so, so important. And I just had this, I think this show tomorrow, but this mother is just so wonderful. She sent me this video and her child has actually, arthroid cerebral palsy, and you know how complicated that is. Not only that you're spastic and you're SCP, but there's all this flaring, uncontrolled flaring often going on, from and sometimes you have to put their hands into a glove so they don't hurt the eyes. And you know what I'm talking about. A lot of who listen right now know what I'm talking about. And she just started my program in Germany. And after the first segment, she was able to give her child that much space. And he also got an intensive, lesson intensive, the boy. But she had the capability of observing her child, exploring the new information that he felt inside of him. And she gave him enough space to explore. And it's actually remarkable to see because he's on this bed and trying to get for the first time in his life by himself off the bed and put the feet on the floor. And it looks really scary because you see this, little uncontrolled movement, and then he was so intentional, and you can see he's intentional. And the mother had the ability to see he was intentional. So she didn't interfere. She gave him the space. So at 5 years old, now I'll come to this timeline again. At 5 years old, for the first time in his life, he managed through his own motor planning, so to speak, yeah, if we want to use that word, to turn himself in such a way that he could slide off the bed and come on his feet. And that is basically your answer, what I want to say to this. So at 5 years, okay, it didn't happen before. Then it happened because he learned something new. And then there was the space given to him to feel himself and explore himself.
I think that's beautiful because you put emphasis on is the child learning? And so long as the child is learning, so many possibilities are available.
Absolutely, all the time. And I have one of my favorite boys that I worked with for 2 months in a row. And the reason, by the way, I could be so successful because that boy, he comes from Australia. They live in Australia, and they came for 2 months to California to work with me. And I recommended the SPML surgery. And he was 8 years old already at the time. And the reason why I also could, my lessons with him, or our lessons, were so effective because he got Feldenkrais, a Feldenkrais person in Australia was working with him. So he wasn't drilled. He had a good feeling about himself, and this is so important, Christine. He was not constantly being pushed in a way that he started to feel lousy about himself, or he didn't want anything to do with his body. Get me out of this body, like I don't want to have anything to do with it. It's just lousy. So he didn't have that. He had all the issues, the CP, the hard to understand him, the drooling, the everything, but he still was a happy guy. So I saw that right away, and that is because they worked with a really fantastic Feldenkrais practitioner. So then I could push it a notch further. So they got the SPML. I recommended that, and then we worked for 2 months. He was 8 years old. He started to walk independently after that at 8 years old. And now I have to think about how old he is now, 14 or 16. And he's even playing soccer in his own way, like he's Paralympic, he feels good about himself. He still explores and learns new things.
I think you raised such a good point about feeling good about himself. Because when you create that environment that you speak about, that safe environment for learning, where a child is loved, seen, heard, valued exactly as they are, exactly where they are, and that, we accompany them through this learning process with joy, that
Yes.
there is no timeline, that there is no goal per se. We're not forcing anything. We're not stuck on, this has to be done by this time. That
Right.
then the child can enjoy that process of learning. They can actually, start to get to know who they are, but with joy, not feeling like, oh, I'm so limited or I'm not good enough. And this often happens when we're forcing. So when we're forcing a child beyond where they are, that's usually when the emotional issues come up and the trauma occurs, because the children really begin to feel like they're not good enough. They start to feel like everything is hard. They
Right.
start to feel like, why is this so hard for me?
Yeah.
Why
I,
can't I do things like the others? Because this is the narrative that is repeated to them over and over again, right? And the experiences that they have. So when we can change the conditions and when we can change the experiences of a child, you have a very different child. And that child has a very different view and sense of their own identity. And that really makes a huge difference in terms of their health and well-being. I don't know if you can perhaps speak to that a little bit.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with you. And not only to the child's well-being, to the whole family well-being. Because
Yes.
because we don't grow up by ourselves. We grow up in our environment. So the environment in our family setting is very, very important. Everybody plays an important role. So as all of the members see, wow, we have a learning child, and actually an intelligent child. And I can't even tell you, Christine, how many kids I met in my life already. I've been doing this for a while, right? That always over and over blow me away with what they can come up with, what they can do. And often they get overlooked, totally overlooked. I mean, I have one client in Slovenia. She is nonverbal. She has a genetic condition, also a lot of flaring going on and CP, but also a genetic component, complicated. But she is so intelligent. And when I worked with her for the first time, I saw it immediately. And then sure enough, I asked her a question, and because I was curious what she was thinking, and then the parents pull out this piece of paper with the letters, the Slovenian alphabet. And they have to hold her hand because it's shaking a lot. So she has a little bit more control. And here she was, boom, 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 so quickly writing, pointing out the letters, and the parents were speaking it for her. And what's the conversation I had with this girl? Oh my God, I was just mind blowing to me, mind blowing. And these parents, for example, have a huge problem, unfortunately, because of the system, to get her into a really good school. They want to shove her into a school where everybody can't ever learn any cognitive, or at least they believe that, and they know their child is bored to death, and so now they're figuring out what to do. And so there's tons and tons of stories like this, because we have to see, like you said, Christine, as long as you're learning, because see, the child, we all have to, but the child has to learn that they can learn. And
Yes.
they always get the experience that I'm being pushed, I'm being yanked, I'm being told, oh, you still can't do this, can't that, blah, blah, blah. I'm just a total failure, and then I have not created the experience in my own self. I can learn, I can do things. I have a choice. I can be part of the day. I can be part of the moment right now with my parent. And if they don't learn that because they're always done to, then they don't learn that they actually can learn. And once you learn that you can learn, there's no limit and no stopping. No matter how old we become, we can always keep learning. That's what the brain and nervous system does for us, right? That's the privilege of being a human, in with brain injury or without brain injury. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you say about the whole family, that it really shifts the whole family because suddenly the parents start to celebrate all
Yes.
of the wins.
Yes.
They start
Absolutely.
to, right? So it totally shifts the parent's perspective. And so instead of being reminded of everything their child's not doing, they're being reminded of all the things their child can
Yes.
do and all the learning that is there and all the possibilities that are present. And I always often tell parents not to attach to stories, right? Because we don't want to attach to any stories. We're in the present moment. In the present moment, the child is learning, progressing, moving forward, wanting to learn, part of the conversation. We focus on that and we keep moving and we keep going. And
Yes.
we're always amazed and surprised by what occurs,
Yes.
right? And it changes the parent's experience. So when you say it shifts the whole family, it's so important what you say. Because, when parents are feeling like there's so much pressure for their child to be a certain way,
Yeah.
or when they feel so much pain from being told that their child is not enough, it's very hard for the parents. So when that conversation changes,
Yes. Yes.
right, for the
Absolutely.
parents.
And then the parent also learn to seek out those and seek out the situation, how the parent can learn more about this,
Yes.
about their child, and seek out those who touch their child that see that. And then that's the other beautiful thing, because then you meet somebody, or maybe sometimes we have to get to the checkup, and over and over again, even though all these parents that I work with for so long, and they've been through my program and they do excellent work now with their child and all that stuff, but still it's always traumatizing going back to the doctor that you have to do, and there it gets told that's not there. And of course the whole child seizes up. Even if they learn stuff, they would never show it to the doctor because they're frozen, because they know how they're seen with judgment, because our system unfortunately is such that doctors almost don't have a choice. I mean, you have luck when you have a doctor who says, whatever you're doing, keep doing it, because I don't know what it is, but it's working. So this is as best as often, unfortunately, we get to, but I mean, we keep educating, it's our job too. And this is why we're doing this here too. But yeah, it's even though they know it all, but still, if you have to go through it, it's traumatizing again.
Yeah.
So you seek out to do it at least as possible, and surround yourself with those who understand. What an amazing child you have, and what an amazing family you are.
Actually, when part of your program is all about embodiment, and I want us to talk about that
Yeah.
because I find embodiment as a parent who went through the ABM program,
Mhm.
uh, I shifted and transformed immensely going through, all of the floor lessons and feeling and sensing myself and rediscovering myself.
Yes,
And I find that it was really this gateway towards deeper healing for me as a parent. So it
yes,
really helped me understand myself better and
yes,
also be able to move through situations like going to the doctors and being reminded of what my child can't do, being able to move through that and just kind of let it fly off my shoulder and not let it affect me anymore, right? So it helped me kind of understand my own triggers. All this to say, I know your work is very much about teaching embodiment, and
yes.
maybe you can speak to what that is and how it really helps and empowers, not helps, let's remove help. How does it empower the parent?
Right. I'm just going to take a sip of water. Hold on one second. So, absolutely. So my program is designed from the very first day, I want to say, to help the parent get embodied and feel on the floor immediately what it means when a child moves. So they have to understand what a typical child is doing, to understand and to help their child that has special needs or is not typically developing. It's very important because it's not a mechanical thing again that you can do to the child. It goes through the feeling experience, through the sensing. So they have to feel and sense it in themselves. Then I help them to translate that into their hands so they can touch the child in a completely different way and translate their own inner embodiment into the child.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how powerful this is. And again, I do it from the very first segment on, from the very first day. And the parent starts to change their view of the world of their child immediately. And that's how it goes. And I have small groups, so they can so much learn from each other also. And they all have arms sitting in similar boats, so to speak, and then they can support them each other. And I want to bring in this example because it was so moving. Um, After the first segment in Germany, and there was a mom and very openly shared her frustration, her anger, her anger for what happened to her and to her child during the birth. And of course, it's in your face every day, nonstop, 24/7. And of course, I don't have to explain that to you, Christine. And this mother, when she, after the third day, and we talked about movement and experienced movement on the floor, and then they touched each other, and something shifted in her that when she took the train home and she came across little kids moving in the train, instead of looking away because it would make her angry to see healthy children move, she looked at the children for the first time. She shared this with us since birth, and she looked at the children with interest. And it was such a big shift. We were all like in tears and goosebumps and all that stuff because it's such a huge shift. Because instead of being stuck in her anger, she started to become curious, and
Mm-hmm.
then also came home and seeing her kid in a very different way, and that shift, I don't know how to explain it because it sounds a little woo, but in so many cases I've seen when the parent shifts and goes through their own process of embodiment and support and being in a safe place so they can learn and they can feel and they can sense, when they start to go there and out of their trauma more and more into the learning, sensing, feeling place, the kid changes by even without being touched.
Yeah.
Because the child feels that, because the mom, the dad, the parent, that's their close environment. When something shifts there, they feel that immediately because they have to. They have all their sense apparatus the whole time really out there, because they can't get up and run away. So they're constantly scanning what's happening here around me. So if the parent starts to change and starts to look and breathe differently, even the child changes.
Thank you for saying that because I often talk about the importance of the parent really taking a look at their feelings and
Yeah.
what's happening inside and the energy they bring to the room where their child is and creating that safe space, creating those conditions, creating that learning environment, and how it's so important for the parent to really look at themselves, look at their feelings. And it changes everything. And the children feel it. And there's this huge correlation between the parent taking the time to heal
Mhm.
and shift their perspective and move into a new place. You know, the parent has to see the possibilities. The
Yeah.
parent has to feel the possibilities. This is where the embodiment comes in, it's feeling what is possible. It's not just knowing what is possible, it's feeling it. You feel it. It's different. And
Absolutely.
that changes everything,
Yeah.
right?
And that is the difference also if the parents, let's say, go, that's what I always saw, go through my program and they can take something away right away, so that process can start immediately. And because we use movement and sensation and feeling and not just talking about it, it goes so much faster. Because after all, if we go back to the child's development, here we are going looping back to my beginning, of my talk after your question, is the child learns through movement by sensing their movement, their weight shifting in the environment. That's how they learn, not because somebody tells the baby, now we're doing XYZ because you're a little baby, and now you have to play with a toy, and now you have to do this, and now we have to do that. No, it's all happens by feeling. And so that's what we have to do also with the parents, so they can start to understand what's going on, and that's how it works. And I want to give another example that is just love this mom. And she has a child now. He's older, he's an adult now, but so he was at 2 years, he had the accident and was a near drown accident, which resulted in a terrible brain injury. And this mom had also two other children, and he was the youngest. And of course, a husband. So here we have the family dynamic again. So we all can imagine or not imagine. I try to imagine it sometimes, but I don't succeed ever, because you can only really know when you're in it. What an unbelievable pain and feeling of guilt it is, especially when it happens in your own home, right? So there you have this incredible dynamic of everybody is in shock, is guilty, feels horrible, and the whole life changes in a way that nobody could have ever imagined. She did all sorts of, over years, she did all sorts of things, like the whole living room was kind of like a training place to do something. Then she learned about our work. Then she found me, she decided to go through my program. It was just amazing what we all learned from her as a mom, and how she shared when every time she came home, her boy was looking at her like, here you come back, they're different, I can feel it, you're doing the right thing. And he gave her those looks, and she shared that it's crazy, and then he could do something new. And by the way, she still gives regular lessons to him. But she changed her whole life. She said she got rid of all the stuff and everything, training every day and all that nonsense. And the boy, who's by the way an amazing spirit, just like, yeah, mom, you're finally on the right path, you know? And it's really remarkable. And she loved it. She couldn't wait for the next segment module to happen, because woohoo, this is my time. I have it all set up at home, but I have my 5 days with Sylvia and my friends, and it rocks. And she couldn't wait to come and have that time for her to feel, to sense, to feel good. Yeah.
It's self-care. Honestly, it's a
Totally.
community, safe space to express yourself, to share. You feel
Absolutely.
understood. I mean, all those things are so important.
Yes.
Important.
Yes.
So we are running out of time, Sylvia. So I wanted to ask you before we close today. This has been a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much.
I
I
agree.
would like to ask you if you have any last words, if there's anything that you want to leave with the parents and the listeners on this podcast today.
Oh, wow. I want to say, because we are humans that can learn and feel and sense, and we all are. And we just, with brain injury, without brain injury, and there are plenty of people that don't have a brain injury and only use a little portion of their brain because they choose to. I mean, no matter, but we all have the ability to feel and to learn and to move to some extent, and that means we can all learn, and everything can change and develop and can get refined. So I'm all for refinement. I'm doing this work for so long. I'm still go on the floor. I do my own research. I explore. I want to make my program better and better and better. I keep refining. There's no ending, you know. So anybody can do that in their own place from where they are. You start from where you are and you keep growing and refining, and we all can do it. So don't despair. And we all need help. We need the environment, like a baby needs a safe environment to learn, hopefully, we also need the safe environment to get reminded to learn. Has to be safe enough so we can kick loose that learning process that we all have in us. All of us. We can all learn this.
Yes, those were beautiful last words. I
Okay,
appreciate
great.
it. Thank you so much, Sylvia.
Thank you. This was wonderful, Christine. Thank you so much.
It was. Thank you. Wow, what an enlightening conversation with Sylvia Shordike. Her insights into the power of small intentional movements and the importance of relational presence truly offer a new lens through which we can support our children. If today's episode resonated with you and you're interested in learning more about Sylvia's Fundamentals of NeuroHorizons experiential movement seminars, be sure to visit neurohorizons.us. I encourage you to dive deeper into this groundbreaking work and see how it can transform your approach to supporting the children in your life. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it with anyone who might benefit from these valuable insights. Together, we can create a world where every child is empowered to reach their full potential. Until next time, take care and keep evolving. You've been listening to Evolving Together with Christine Labbé, beyond the diagnosis into a new realm of possibilities. Tune in every second Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Time or 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Transformation Talk Radio for more insights, understanding, and expansion that empower you to support your child in a way that is aligned with their soul's potential. Your child deserves to be seen, heard, valued, and celebrated exactly as they are. Are you ready to be the change you want to see for your neurodiverse child? Take the first step towards a new future and visit www.christinelabbe.com or check out our collective site, www.evolvemovement.ca.